Welcome back to VCT Theory. Game Changers Champs is right around the corner, and we're going to be making an biased power ranking system for the teams competing at the event. So let's get right into it.
The first team that we got is G2 Gozen. G2 Gozen had a pretty rough, like shaky season in GC because they started the year without Petra and then they rebought Petra back in. And eventually they kind of squeaked it out and made it through into the GC champs here by winning stage three out of nowhere. Um, Obviously, historic team, lots of people backing them, lots of fans. But it was an interesting start to the year because they made a really weird change that didn't pan out for them, and then they eventually had to just bring Petra back, and it worked out for them at the end because they won the stage three bracket and made it here. Let's get your thoughts on where you'll be placing that team.
You see, G2, knowing like the historicness of them, knowing Mimi, knowing Petra, I don't like the way they didn't have Petra on the team like the start of the year, and then they brought her back, and then they brought her back, and then they won stage three. It doesn't make any sense. Like, if they kept her, they would have been fine. So right now, the only place that I can really put G2, I would keep them in top dogs if they kept it that way the whole time. But it's like, no matter how much experience that they might have, I would realistically put them in top dogs. I'm gonna put them in contenders for this, for my opinion, because I just feel like, you know, even though they just added Petra back into the system, I think they might have some things that they might need to work out, even if they look good in the EMEA stage three. So I'm gonna put them in
Yeah,
contender.
I'm if I'm being honest, I would always keep this team as the top dogs.
Mm,
They always have a chance. They have a great caller, and I guess former caller as well. Both Mimi and Petra working together.
mm-hmm.
We got Vanya still there. Akita is their new player, and then Amy's there as well.
Yeah.
I think they have a solid team. I guess they had to figure things out. But I mean, I can see your route. I think I will concede here and put them in contender because I think that you are right that they've just come into form, which means that they're gonna be hot going into the
Mm,
game. Like they're gonna be in form going into the game. But it's just hard to say that if you start the year out with no consistency and you're finally consistent, a lot of teams like it's kind of like a lot of teams think that G2 when they're super consistent manages to like, always bomb out like the in the
mm-hmm.
actual international events. But G2 goes in, they're usually the very consistent team and they continue that consistency.
Yeah.
So the problem I'm having with them is that I don't know what to do if they're supposedly inconsistent. Are they going to just show up at the big stage and continue to dominate, or if they're going to kind of pan out and not get to like the final results that they want? So yeah, I kind of agree. I think the worst positioning we can put them as contender because they just
Yeah.
got too much experience and they got some new blood. So I think they're gonna probably go far, but we'll put them in contender for now.
I was thinking about when you mentioned the, inconsistency at the start, and then they could just do out the national land after, they're on a hot streak right now. And had me thinking a little bit of how NRG's year ended up being, even though they had like a pretty bad start and then ended up being there. I think G2 definitely has a chance of doing that after the one little switch change that they made, and then they are making it possible. Like, they won stage three. So I was actually gonna concede to you putting him in top dog, and the crazy part is that we literally just both switched. But I kind of concede
I
them.
think I'm gonna be honest. I think we just keep them in contender
Mm-hmm.
because the one reason I say that is that if we're gonna put it there is because I think that it just makes sense that there is there is a lot of good teams that we'll see, and I think that
Yeah.
them being a contender, they're not a dark horse by any means because they're
Mm-hmm.
really good. But it's just I don't know. It's just very hard for me to place them as like the winning team. So
Yeah. Okay.
that's the thing that I have a trouble with. So I think contenders in a good spot, but obviously, like I will say that it's not like the gap between contender and top dog for them is very big.
Yeah.
They're right up there,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
All right. So I'll leave him a contender.
All right.
All right. The next team we got up is Crew Blaze. You see, Crew coming out of Latin America. Usually, Latin American teams aren't the strongest, but even though they did dominate in their own region, I have my own personal opinion right now. One thing to take note of on Crew Blaze is their star duelist Dodds. They are frying in their Latin America qualifiers, and then they have Biazic, who's been known to be on this team for a while. But besides all that, what are your thoughts on putting them on this tier list?
Yeah, if I'm being honest, don't generally rate the LATAM region high, whether it is like actual VCT or GC,
Hmm.
because I just think that they're a weaker region. We saw that kind of obviously completely different scenario, but we saw that in Red Bull home ground, and we saw the other off-season events and how they kind of just played out. The LATAM teams showed up, like for example 9Z and Shinden, but like they didn't really show anything that was like crazy, even in Ascension. Like they didn't really compete with Envy or any of the NA teams, as a
Hmm.
matter of fact. um I would say that that's just part of like the fact that the region is kind of weaker in general. As you said, Dodds I've seen like in the games is just always fragging out, and Biazik is like kind of their like one of their like flex players, very good flex player. But in general, I'm just gonna go based off of like the region and regional like how strong each region is,
Hmm.
and I'm just gonna go on out and say that Crew Blaze has no chance at like making even the finals or winning this event.
I'm gonna have to agree with you and put them in no chance spot. I think they really like. It's not like them as players are bad. I just feel like they just don't have the competition that would help them to strive in these international events. I just feel like most LATAM teams are playing against their own region, and realistically, if they're dominating their region and they go into internationals, they usually bomb out. And I'm just going off of basically like a historical context where usually Latin teams just don't do well. So that's my main reason for having Crew here. I don't think you should sleep on Dodds though. I think Dodds can definitely make an impact, and I think they're gonna try to prove that they belong in the international. But I do feel like they will fall flat.
Yeah, I mean, one other thing is just to say within the region. Obviously, Latam and Brazil is different, but at GC, Brazil always dominates in terms of
Hmm.
like in within Latam and Brazil together as a region. So I think it's pretty fair to assume that they should fall flat. Are they gonna? I'm not really sure, but it's just like all the other regions, whether it's Americas, Pacific, and Brazil, they just typically outshine LATAM, and that's kind of why I'm assuming that they're only given obviously one slot. So yeah, I think no chance is a fair position for them. All right, the next team we're going to talk about is Ninetails coming strong out of Korea. They're Pacific's number two seed, only losing to Xipto twice in the upper final and in the grand final. They were dominating their own region of Korea. Like I don't think they had one loss. But again, if we were to think about it, I would say that Korea as a region probably stronger than LATAM as a whole. But again, it's like a smaller region where dominating your own region doesn't necessarily correlate to dominating like the whole Pacific, and that was kind of shown where Zipto beat them both times
Hmm.
when they faced them. I would say the team is more like everybody contributes. We have Full Moon, their Senti player, their duelist is pretty good, but it's not like there's like like a shining player every time carrying them or every time showcasing good plays. It's kind of like a team that does well together. I would say I don't really have like any reason for this, but I would say they're obviously like a dark horse. I can't put them at no chance because I think that the region is just definitely stronger as a whole, Pacific. So being number two seed there helps them. But I can't also place them above a bunch of the other teams because they have history. Obviously, it's this team. It's not. It's gonna be their first showing at GC champs.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm placing them at slight chance. What do you think about that?
I think I'm gonna have to agree with you and throwing them in slight chance. Initially thinking about it, um, the region as a whole isn't actually one of the higher like talked about regions when it comes to GC. Usually, when it comes to GC, it's either talking about Brazil because you got Team Liquid, MIBR. It's either NA because you got Shopify Rebellion and whoever comes out of the number two usually, and then you have EMA who holds G2. So like realistically, Pacific as a region in GC, they might have dominated before in the past when it came to like SMG when they were like being the paper X of GC. But as of right now, uh, other regions are definitely dominating more. So I would honestly have to agree with you and put Ninetails in the slight chance spot. All right, the next team that we got is SRG, Shopify Rebellion Gold. As you know, this team is coming off a championship from 2024 in Berlin, but they did lose their star duelist in Floor, but they did pick up another star duelist that was on FlyQuest Red, Dodonut. So I have a really biased opinion on where I would place this team. But where would you put Shopify Rebellion Gold?
Okay, so I'm gonna say this right now is that obviously they lost firepower, but one
Hmm.
thing that usually turns out that it's good when you only swap one player is that you keep the identity, keep the system, keep the core. Obviously, you have Mel gelling. That's always gonna be good, turn out good. You're gonna have a pretty fun time there in the server. Um, Obviously, I'm also biased, big Mel fan. So I think we both know where we're placing them. But if I have to be completely honest, maybe they don't have as big of a firepower like lead as in comparison to last year. Last year, everybody was just like it's kind of like they were treating GC winners like it was Envy winning Ascension. It was
Hmm.
like if they don't win, then something has gone terribly wrong. So, but this year, I wouldn't say that like that's the narrative, right? They're
Hmm.
not going in. They're obviously going in as the defending champs, right? They're going in as probably still heavy favorites, but they're not going in as if like if we don't win this event, it's over for us. So I don't think it's that big of a gap. But I'm obviously just gonna place them as top dogs. Obviously, they just have a really good chance with how strong the region is, Americas as a whole, and how they've consistently been there for years, back to back to back, different roster
Hmm.
iterations, different team names, um, whatever it was. They always have a chance, and they're always gonna be one of the favorites for the tournament.
I'm gonna have to agree with you. I'm just gonna throw them in top dogs off rip because this team is disgusting. I agree with the whole they kept the core together and they replaced one player, a player who knows how to play their role, literally duelist role, and that's totally fine. I think although they might have lost a little bit of firepower from Florida Dodona, I do feel like somebody's gonna step up. You know, I feel like we're coming into an era where IGLs are shooting more, and I think Mel has been shooting ridiculously in GC. I there's nothing telling me that there isn't a chance they can't back to back. I know there are other teams that have the ability to stop them from what they're doing, but I think this team is definitely coming in hot, coming in to defend the championship, and they're gonna prove themselves as to why they remain top of the GC world.
All right. Speaking of top dogs, we got a back to back coming here.
Mm.
From my viewpoint, we got MIBR GC. Surprisingly, looked a little iffy. I'm not gonna lie, looked a little iffy and had to come through the Americas LCQ to make it here. They got back to backed by Team Liquid in the GC in the Brazil finals and the upper finals. And I would say that they didn't look truly like the team that could win it. But the problem with this team is that they are the epitome of firepower, right? We
Mm-hmm.
got SRN dropping 50s casually, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Obviously not the like strongest team like cohesion wise. But I think that doesn't really matter. It's kind of like not that they play like Envy or anything, but they just overpower you unless you have a great read on them, which Team Liquid had twice. But again, they had it twice. We had a fucking banger match, MIBR versus Team Liquid finals. I don't know, it went OT something crazy. I don't remember. Let me pull it up. 23-21,
Mm-hmm.
where Team Liquid managed to squeeze that one through. Um, SRN dropped 50 just to lose. We got Jujina on the Astra, dropping 37 kills. I don't know, crazy game. Um, but I think I'm gonna have to just put them as top dogs. I don't know. I think that the fact that they actually didn't win their region and the fact that they had to qualify through the LCQ gives them extra motivation to perform better. And I think they're just gonna ride the momentum. I'm gonna be honest. They're gonna ride the momentum. And I would say, as much as I think that the Brazilian region as a whole is very strong. I think MIBR realistically might be the top over there. So I'm placing them at top dogs.
All right. So the last thing that you took, I'm gonna have to, you know, go against that. But I do agree, MIBR will be a top dog, so I'm just gonna place them in top dogs. Now, you saying that they're gonna be the best Brazilian team, I might have to disagree a little bit. Now, listen, MIBR right now, I understand they're a really, really great team. They're also, coming off of a loss from the last championship to Shopify Rebellion where they got absolutely smoked 13-7, 13-7, 13-11. It's just, they got something to prove. MIBR also did go through a roster change. They did one little swap. They swapped Jelly with Basterda that was on Team Liquid. And with Bastetta on their team, they look so much better. Like, you got Bastetta shooting, SRN shooting, and they look like they're very unstoppable. But I'm not gonna say that they aren't stoppable. They did get stopped when it came to their, Brazilian qualifier. So I'm gonna have MIBR the top dog. SRN, there's no doubt telling me that she's the best duelist in GC right now. Now, if floor was here, there'd be a conversation to be had, but there is no floor. So best duelist in GC goes to SRN. There's no doubt about it. So I'm gonna have to have MIBR being top dog. There is a potential that they win it all, but they are not my favorites to win it all in this tournament. The next team we have is Karmine Corp. They are the most consistent team in EMEA GC this year. One notable player that you might know from previous years is Glance, who was on G2 Gozen back in 2023. Now, I don't really have too many thoughts on where I'd place this team, but I only have my thoughts because of the region. Where would you place Karmine Corp?
Yeah, Karmine Corp. I mean, I honestly I don't know much. Obviously, we got Glance. They have two Turkish players, which is interesting
Mm,
for the team. Maybe firepower increase.
mm,
They're the most consistent team, as you mentioned, in EMEA. Not in the sense that like they've been winning, but they just have the most points, meaning that they've won the most.
mm,
Uh, Recently, going down to both GIANTX and G2, and then throughout this like stage 3 and stage 2, they've sometimes beaten them. They've both beaten G2 and GIANTX before, and then they've sometimes even lost all the way back to G2 and GIANTX. It's kind of like a rivalry that they have going. So they sometimes win, sometimes lose. It's kind of hard to predict. I would say, just based off of a glance at the team, no pun intended, there's nothing like jumping out to me saying that yeah, this is like the best team we have in EMEA. But obviously, as you mentioned, EMEA as a region historically has been very strong in GC, and I think that they have a chance, not a great chance, and for that reason, I'm just putting them in the uh, mid tier because I think that they're not a bad team by any means, but obviously extremely hot and cold against the top dogs, or not top dogs even, just like the good teams at the top of the EMEA region.
I'm gonna agree with you and putting Carmine Corp in a mid tier, just because they were consistent throughout the entire year, right? But they have gone back and forth with G2 and Giant X throughout the year, and I feel as though if they are viewed as one of the weaker teams coming out of EMEA, even though the region is very strong, it's definitely going to be higher than some of the other regions like LATAM or even Pacific region for GC.
All right, the next team that we got Nova Esports, coming straight out of China, dominating the region again. We've said this multiple times, but probably not the strongest region for GC historically. Obviously, a newer region to GC as well. Um, but I think that they do have something up their belt, which I only noticed once I watched a game of theirs, and they got Shirazi coming from Xipto and SMG back in the day, and I think that's a pretty cool move to have. And just because of that, I mean, I'm gonna have to say that the team isn't anything crazy,
Mm.
obviously, coming from one of the weaker regions. But I'm gonna say that we can't really say that the team also doesn't have a chance. So in my head, I'm kind of like balancing between putting them at low chance or putting them in mid. I don't really know what the correct move here is, but just from my gut, I'm gonna say that they're gonna go right there in uh, slight chance with Ninetails. What are your thoughts on that?
I have to agree with you and put them in a slight chance. I really do feel like, although they might be dominating their own region, if the region isn't strong, I can't really put them in a higher tier. And that's kind of the same way I've been moving with Ninetales and Crew. Like, no matter how dominant you might be in your own specific region, when it comes to the overarching region of it all, and then playing against the teams internationally, especially if you're newer, it's not, you don't really have the best rep, and you don't really have the experience to compete against the teams that have that much rep when it comes to these tournaments. So I'm gonna have to put Nova in slight chance as well. Team Liquid Brazil. That's the next team that we got for this list. You see, Team Liquid, they won their Brazil qualifier. They made it to GC champs, coming out at number one seed for Brazil. They have a point to prove. Brazil and MIBR, they went through a trade where they swapped out Basterda and Jelly. So Team Liquid got Jelly and MIBR got Basterda. I think as though this team, I would personally put them in the top dogs. This is the team that I'm repping actually to win GC. So I'm gonna have to put them in top dogs for myself. I do feel like the team is the exact same. They have a point to prove. Daiki's an excellent caller. They really have what it takes to compete against these teams. And if SRN is the best duelist in GC and they manage to put her down and close it out, I do feel like the team is better overarching. I don't feel like having one player that can do it all is going to be the reason why a team can take it there. So I'm going to have to put Team Liquid in top dogs. What are your thoughts on this?
So I'm gonna be honest. You made good arguments. I'm not really swayed. I think the team is a great team. I think that in general, we have a lot of teams that are like up there in contention, or there could be considered top dogs. Um, I would say Team Liquid. I would say the one thing is I do think that it's all about slotting in and like figuring out who fits better. So like the one-to-one swap obviously worked in the favor of Team Liquid because they managed to beat them twice back to back. But the problem that I'm kind of having is that I think that overall, bar for bar, Bastarda is more valuable as a player, right?
Uh,
So the swap, I think, like the experience brought over to MIBR, hopefully with some practice, obviously they've had time, practice and cohesion, would make MIBR in my head the better team. So I'd be repping them over Team Liquid. But what I will say is that this is a thing that I always bring up is that teams that play like teams, where there's no real person that is always shining, tend to have this quality of beating out that one star player. There's a
mhm,
chance. Unless that star player happens to be on the team that plays like a team, like SRG and Floor last season, where there's just basically you don't have a chance because
mhm,
you have a team that is the best team and you have the best player on that team. Kind of like when we had Optic Yay.
mhm.
There's not like very good team for their event, and just Yay was shooting on all cylinders. But in this case, that's not the thing. So I mean, I will say that I can see them as the top dog. Obviously, they clearly have won their region, one of the stronger regions in Brazil.
Mhm.
Always performing in GC. And they won their region for a reason. I'm not the team, or I'm not the person who would be repping them, but I can see the viewpoint, and I think that it's like objectively very fair to place them as a top dog team, and I think that just makes it cool that we have a bunch of teams who have a chance to win. It's not like a team. It's not like an event where there's some expectations. So I'm okay with conceding to you and agreeing with you, and we can place them in the top dogs.
If you weren't gonna place them in the top dogs, I was gonna say you kind of contradicting yourself. Talking about a team that plays like a team that can beat out a team that has one player, and so Team Liquid beat MIBR. So if you want to have MIBR in the top dogs, my Team Liquid, that's just kind of crazy to even think about. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna have to agree with you. It's like I don't know. It's like I have like a tingling where it's like I just don't think they're gonna win, so I wouldn't
Okay.
put them there. But again, we have to be objective. We have
Hmm.
to be fair, and I think that's what I at least try to do. Unless
Hmm.
unless it's NRG where I'm not fair anymore.
Okay.
But I think that yeah, it's completely fair to put them as top dogs, so we can put them there. We got the last team, third place team coming up from the EMEA region. It's GIANTX. Again, very similar, honestly, to Karmine Corp. Hot and cold team. Sometimes losing to like some random teams that like you might not have heard of, like
Hmm.
Black Hand. And sometimes beating G2, sometimes losing to G2, sometimes beating SK, sometimes losing to them. Very hot and cold team. They got the Turkish core, which I think is always about firepower. They got Smurfette, they got Ness, they got Ava, and then I think that in general, pretty solid team again in a solid region. But I'm gonna say that I think EMEA does actually kind of go with like their 1, 2, 3, like the best team coming out won the final thing, even though they haven't been super consistent.
Hmm.
G2 as the top dog, and then I would say that Karmine Corp and GIANTX, pretty like average teams, even though they are in a very strong region. So let's see, where would you place them there?
I'd have to put GIANTX in the mid region. You know, as you said earlier, they're losing to teams that you might have heard of or might not have even heard of. And I feel as though just because of their region being competitive, them making it to a tournament right here, it just makes them be in a spot where I just can't see them having no chance. And I can see them, winning a singular game. Granted, to who has to be to one of the teams that I already have in the slight chance, no chance, or even mid. So I would have to throw Giant X in the mid category because even though they might be one of the worst regions, one of the worst teams in the region, their region is just very much better than the other regions and the teams in there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have anything much to add to there. I think it's just completely fair. We can just toss them in mid.
And the last team that we have is Xipto Esports. They're the number one seed coming out of Pacific with their IGL Capricious. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. If I butchered it, my apologies. But for number one seed coming out of Pacific, I have my ideas on where I would put them. I think their team is very well structured. They like to run the deluxe cipher comp on maps that aren't the most notable to be running a deluxe cipher comp, such as Haven and Corrode. And so their playstyle is completely different to most teams when it comes to any of these maps. So where would you put Zipto Esports?
But I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of rough because I think that the team is very good. Obviously, they beat Ninetails, and they also beat Team Falcons, which I think before that they played was probably favored against Xipto, like heavily favored as well. Like Xipto, like it was an upset that they beat Team Falcons because Team Falcons obviously is like has Mary and just a strong team in general.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that I'm not too surprised by this outcome. The one thing that I will say is that you mentioned the Cypher deadlock comp, but that was pre-patch. So the
Mm-hmm.
problem is, are they gonna stick to that? How good is that gonna be in general? Are we gonna swap? I don't know. But if since we're going off power rankings and what they've achieved, right? It's not really about predictions here. I think that they're a very good team. Uh I'm gonna be a little bit biased because I think if we were being objective and if we were going for just the regional thing,
Mm-hmm.
obviously they've won their region, and they've shown that they have the ability to win very well. Obviously, they have lost in the C region to Team Falcons plenty of times. It's not like they're a perfect team, but they managed to get it done here. What I will say is that, like, realistically, they could be thought of as a mid team,
Mm-hmm.
an upper echelon mid team. But I'm kind of rooting for them. I hope they do well. And in terms of power ranking, I do think that if things go their way, um, which is a possibility, meaning that, I mean, I'm gonna have to bring up the bracket here, but they do need to beat Karmine Corp, which is
Mm-hmm.
possible. It is possible. But the thing is, if they beat Karmine Corp, most likely they're going against either MIBR or Shopify Rebellion, which is going to make it very difficult. But as long as they don't lose their first match to Carmine Corp, they can find their way back up through the lower bracket. So I will say that I'm hoping this happens. I don't know. Like, if we're being completely objective, I would put them in mid. But I think that if things go their way, which sometimes there's teams that happens to teams. Like we have Paper Reps at Masters, obviously a great team for so long,
Mm-hmm.
never could do an international event, but they have a chance. They have a good chance, and I'm placing them in contender.
Oh, oh, okay. That that one surprised me. The way you were talking about them, I actually believe that you were gonna put them in the mid tier, but like, in the higher ranking of it. I actually was gonna also throw them in contender because I feel as though even though you mentioned the fact that it was like a pre-patch thing with the Cypher Deadlock comp on these certain maps, I think just being able to run a comp like that where you're able to be flexible on maps that, you know, you come up with your own ideas. Like you don't see people running a Cypher Deadlock on Haven or even a Corrode. So it just gives me the idea that they're able to be flexible on some of these maps and come up with their own ideas. I think they already have ideas that are coming into this new patch, and I think they're gonna be able to execute it in a proper way. So I definitely have to agree with you and put them in contender. I actually didn't want to put them in the mid tier. I wanted to keep them in contender. I do feel like they have a really good chance of beating some of these teams in a way where we just wouldn't expect them to be. Like you'd be watching the game and being like, who are these players? How are they doing this? So I actually would put them in a contender slot and view them as a team that could stop one of these top dogs or even a contender team. But them taking it all to win it all, that's something we'll just have to find out and see. These are our power rankings for Game Changers Championship 2025 in Seoul. What do you think of our power rankings? Is there any team you think we rated too high or too low? And who do you have to win it all? Leave your thoughts in the comment section. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next video.